My name is Judan Spencer Phillip, and I am the communications specialist here at Bebashi. If you have joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time, we hope that today's event will be enlightening and will inspire you to not only connect with Bebashi to learn more about our work and our impact, but also to become advocates for our communities. During the discussion, you will be able to submit any questions that you have for the panel through the Q&A tab, and we will try to answer all or most of the questions during the Q&A segment. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. Now, before we begin, I would like to briefly share a little bit about Bebashi for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. So Bebashi Transition to Hope was founded in 1985 as a full-service HIV/AIDS organization with a special interest in serving low-income people of color with HIV disease. We were the first African-American organization in the United States to address the AIDS crisis in urban communities, and our mission is to empower Black and Brown people to enhance the quality of their health and overall well-being by providing access to culturally sensitive, high-quality healthcare, HIV/AIDS services, health education, and social services. Our work is significantly influenced by our core values, which we like to call the Bebashi Way. And our team at Bebashi are committed to the Bebashi mission and the improvement of our communities. We are an organization created by the Black community to help educate and empower the Black community and other marginalized groups. We serve all of our clients with dignity, compassion, and respect. We provide reliable and consistent care to all of our clients, and we are a voice for the community and for social justice. Over the years, Bebashi has recognized that our clients and the communities we serve are faced with a myriad of socioeconomic challenges, such as health disparities and food insecurity. And Bebashi now offers a wide range of services that go beyond HIV to directly address these issues, help our clients achieve self-sufficiency, and help our communities to flourish. So now I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming back our moderator for today's event, award-winning anchor and reporter, NBC 10's Stefania Jimenez. Stefania has worked with us on 2 of our previous community conversations and is definitely a part of our extended Bebashi family. As a reporter, Stefania is passionate about telling compelling stories about people in the community. And as many of you may already know, you can watch her anchor weekend mornings and report weekdays on NBC 10. Welcome back, Stefania.
Well, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so excited to moderate this conversation, something that as Philadelphians, as people who live and or work in Philadelphia, these are 2 subjects that we are, greatly affected by. And when I was reading the about all of our panelists, I mean, everybody's just so impressive. So I'm super excited to have this conversation. So what we're talking about today is Philadelphia's gun violence and its link to food insecurity. So we're going to talk about obviously we're going to talk with some of the top experts in the studies on the root causes of gun violence, and also some of Bebashi's key partners in the fight against food insecurity. So now I want to introduce all of our panelists, and I'll start here with Councilmember Jamie Gauthier. She is a born and raised West Philadelphian. She was elected to the 3rd District to represent council from the 3rd District in November of 2019. And she has a very long resume here, 2 decades of experience fighting for fairness, equality, and justice in neighborhoods throughout the city. She specifically wants to tackle gentrification and poverty in the 3rd District, and she has an agenda that prioritizes creating and preserving affordable housing, improving educational outcomes, and connecting residents to family-sustaining jobs and advancing small businesses. So Councilmember Gauthier, welcome. And now we'll go to Janice Tosto. She is the Hunger Relief Supervisor from Bebashi. which addresses food insecurity in 14 North and Northwest Philadelphia communities. She creates partnerships and manages community outreach activities to promote Bebashi's health services and its visitor choice Food First Pantry. She coordinates the HEZ Eats School Fund programs, which, by the way, feeds hundreds of students and their families every month at 4 Philadelphia public schools. Now we have Dr. Randi Smith. She's a trauma surgeon from Grady Memorial Hospital. She received her MD degree from the University of California, San Francisco, and her MPH from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She completed her general surgery residency at the University of California, San Francisco, East Bay, and her fellowship in trauma and surgical critical care surgery at Penn. Now she serves as a trauma surgeon, an emergency elective general surgeon, and a surgical critical care intensivist at Grady Memorial Hospital, which we just mentioned. And her special interests include violence prevention, injury prevention, and clinical outcomes with a focus on understanding the social determinants of health that lead to trauma and health disparities. Dr. Smith, welcome. And now we have Tyler A. Ray, who is a community organizer from Urban Creators. He's 23 years old, already pretty impressive. He's an activist based in Philadelphia. His call to be a social activist was deeply inspired by his life growing up in North Central Philly and witnessing the systematic racism that has plagued North Philadelphia for generations. Now, for the last 4 years specifically, he's taken a much more political approach to community activism. Since 2018, he's been the ward leader for the 16th ward. And as a ward leader, he has hosted workshops to empower young African Americans to become more politically involved, to maybe run for public office. And he's also helped build positive relationships between police departments and community residents, obviously doing the Lord's work there, something that we all need. Tyler, welcome. And now Tyreek Glasgow is going to join us. He is the founder of the Young Chances Foundation, and his role is about creating possibilities for the children, families, and seniors in the city of Philadelphia. And his vision is to provide quality and diverse programs, resources, and information for people within the community, while also enhancing the strengths and dreams of our young people and also our seniors. And he founded the Young Chances Foundation in 2012, which was established to provide children the opportunity to have fun, strengthen relationships, and also build positive leadership skills through peer-motivated activities. So Tyreek, welcome. So now I'm going to start with some numbers here because they're just simply fascinating when we talk about the issue of gun violence in our city. So according to the city's office to date, and this is pretty sad that I had to check up on these numbers even this morning because the number of homicides and shootings change on the daily. So as of today, there have been 305 homicides in Philadelphia, and that's an increase of 33% from 2020. Now, there have been 1,167 victims of gun violence. 997 did not die, but 261 did die as a result of gun violence. And reports show that the gun violence in Philadelphia this year has been predominantly taking place in specific North Philadelphia neighborhoods. And now I want to have Janice step in for a second because she's representing Bebashi here, and she's going to share a few quotes for us on the topic. And we're going to do this before we start our discussion. So Janice, take it away.
Thank you so much, Stephania. So in doing my research on this topic, I've been doing research ever since my team and I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Smith. So in doing my research, I came across some quotes that I think really provide some context to the conversation that we're going to have this morning. So the first quote is from Catherine Moore. She's the director of food pantry programs, St. James Food Pantry in Chicago, Illinois. And Ms. Moore says, I think people underestimate the power and destruction of being hungry. My second quote comes from the organization Feeding America. And this was a post that was actually posted on Phil Abundance's Instagram site. And the quote says, "Racism and the systems that support it are central to why many of our Black neighbors don't have enough to eat." And then my final quote is from Victoria Martin Nelson. She's a volunteer with the South Philadelphia Community Fridge. And she says, "The most foundational piece of having a happy, healthy, safe neighborhood is that people have enough to eat."
Janice, thank you. So now we would like to hear from Dr. Smith first. We would like to hear from you on your research, specifically on the correlation between gun violence and hunger. So we want to start really just to hit the ground running with this topic and just take it away, Dr. Smith. What is that correlation there?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my research. As mentioned, I lived in Philadelphia not too long ago and now work in Atlanta as a trauma surgeon. And I'm also a public health educator. And as many of us know, gun violence is a public health problem that is in a crisis right now. My research and my education, my whole academic portfolio has really focused on identifying the root causes that lead to violence and injury, those that impact recovery, and those that lead some people to keep coming back and forth to the emergency department time and time again with more injuries. So I look at many different social determinants of health. But I believe that we were the first, my team was the first to look at the correlation between food insecurity and gun violence. And what we did was we looked at 1,700 patients that came to our hospital for gunshot wounds over a 7-year period. And we knew their home zip codes. And we were able to map out hotspots where gun violence was concentrated. And we simultaneously looked at census tract data from the USDA's Food Access Atlas. And we mapped out locations where there were food deserts, meaning there was a far distance between homes and grocery stores, where there was low median household income and poor transportation. And all those factors really wrap into food insecurity. And we found that the two maps of gun violence and food insecurity overlap so intimately, almost like a snug glove. And it makes sense, right? The food insecurity and gun violence share many of the same risk factors of poverty, of deep-seated systemic marginalization and racism, like you just mentioned, housing insecurity, poor education, and the list goes on and on. And so what we did was we took this information, and now one of the other investigators, Dr. Kenesha Williams, and I were looking to partner with local organizations like Bebashi that address food insecurity as a potential opportunity to curb gun violence, or at least, at very least, impact how people recover after injury. So I keep urging Janice to start Bebashi in Atlanta one day, because I think it'll be a perfect partnership.
So can you give any more specifics on when it comes to your research, when it comes to that link? Because when I sent out information on Twitter about us moderating or having this discussion, some people were kind of skeptical, like, what do you mean, gun violence, food insecurity? How does that make sense? So can you just give a little bit more specific information for those people who are
so when
kind
we're
of
looking,
wondering?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're looking at these correlations, we're not saying cause and effect, right? And what I think is that we have the same risk factors that lead to food insecurity. The things that wrap into food insecurity are low median household incomes, and just lack of access. Those are the same risk factors that lead to gun violence. And like I said, it's not a cause and effect thing. It's more so that we need to get to the root causes and go upstream. And that's how we're going to attack all of these different crises that our communities are seeing. And I also think that we need to make sure that we have service provisions that are dedicated to addressing these issues. And that's what really our study is talking about. When we talk to people and we ask them about food insecurity, when we say, do you have access to food? People will a lot of times say yes, even though they don't have access to nutritious food. So that also is another factor, is that, you know, if you go into some communities of color, you see nothing but fast food restaurants. They're cheap and they do provide some substance, but it's actually not nutritious. It's actually not going to keep people healthy. There's high rates of diabetes, hypertension, and other chronic illnesses that are linked to having poor nutrition. And I think all of these things really, there's an interplay with all of them.
You know, throughout this discussion, I'm looking at all of your faces here, and I keep looking at Councilmember Gauthier because you're shaking your head. And I'm wondering, as the only elected official on this panel, what is something that City Council or anybody, what can you do when you hear about this link, this commonality between gun violence and food insecurity?
Great. First, I wanted to add a couple of points. One, I wanted to add context around what was said earlier, that this activity is primarily happening in North Philadelphia. We're seeing drastically increased levels of gun violence in Black and Brown neighborhoods across the city. And my district, which includes West and Southwest Philadelphia, has been particularly struck this year. And just to give you a sense of what has happened over a 2-week period, on July 4th, there was a mass shooting as people were attending a 4th of July community cookout that took the lives of 2 people and injured 2 others. On Friday night, there was a 5-person mass shooting at the Bartram Village housing development, which killed 1 and injured a teenage girl. On Saturday night, there was a shooting at 50th and Haverford that injured a 1-year-old baby. As their mother was shopping, right? And they were just caught in the crossfire. And one of the striking things about that incident, is, I was on the scene and I'm talking to a few neighbors, and, the scene was of course roped off as police were processing and doing their work. And a mother walked up with 2 young children in a stroller, and she was intending to go to the bodega where the shooting happened, but she couldn't. And she said, I don't know where else I'm gonna go. There's nowhere else for me to go. So not only, so that's an incredible example of a shooting happening in a neighborhood with poor food access in a grocery store and impacting that mother's life, right? And so one, I just wanted to make that quick point. And second, I wanted to commend Dr. Smith on her work linking food insecurity with urban gun violence, because this will allow us, I think, to focus more on this issue as a root cause, and also tailor the services that are needed in our communities. And I think from a council perspective, or from a public official perspective, we need to use this data to provide, to help provide better services and access in our Black and Brown communities where we have a lot of food insecurity. And obviously we have to do short-term, interventions, right? We have to invest in violence prevention and violence interruption on a short-term basis. But beyond that, we need to be working to fully change the trajectory of the lives of the individuals who are considered high risk, right? And so we need to be thinking about beyond violence prevention and interruption, essential services like food, mental and behavioral health, utility assistance, rental assistance. These are key to making sure that our neighborhoods are stable and thriving, and for changing the lives of people who are considered at risk. And so I think some of the things that we can use this data to do is to make more capital available for our ability to create better food options within communities. We can be more aggressive about trying to attract operators and changing some of the stereotypes that they may have about our neighborhoods, that they're basing on race and sort of the reputation of a neighborhood. I think we need to be more proactive in this area in terms of making sure that our people are served.
Tyler, I want to go to you with this, because this is also something that you see play out a lot as a community organizer. So each one of you brings a different perspective, but you see a lot of this play out outside on the ground. So just give us your perspective on this.
Well, the first thing I would just ask you is, have you ever been hangry before? You ever been so hungry that you just get angry and every little thing just irritates you until you eat? Well, we're fortunate enough to eat, but there's some people out there who just cannot eat. So therefore, every little other issue just blows up into a major issue where you don't think clearly and you just lash out. So exactly what Dr. Smith said is a reason why we call it junk food. Because there's food, it can fill you up, it can sustain you, but is it nutritious? It's not really nutritious. So I work for an organization called the Philadelphia Urban Creators, and we're an urban farm located in the Hartranft community. The 19133 zip code is the poorest zip code in Philadelphia. And a lot of people who live in that neighborhood are also elderly, and they cannot walk to the nearest supermarket, which is like 15 minutes away. So before Urban Creators was there, it was definitely a food desert because there was no way that many elderly people can walk to those nearest supermarket. So what we do is we provide produce, life-sustaining foods that people can eat. One thing that I definitely realized as a kid was that I grew up right around Broad and Dolphin Street. And at Broad and Dolphin, within walking distance, there's about 6 different funeral homes. I thought that was usual as a kid. I actually came from the funeral business. My grandmother used to work at Baker's Funeral Home. My cousin, a distant cousin, used to run the Ray Funeral Home at 16th and Dolphin. So I always thought it was normal because that's the business I came from, but I never understood why there were so many within walking distance. When I became older, I realized that if you live in the inner city, especially if you are a Black male, if you're not shot dead on the streets, you're dying from either heart disease or kidney disease and complications of diabetes. And it was all located within that one area. So that's definitely something that triggered me to realize that there is definitely an issue. Now, we can't just say, oh, people are hungry, that's why they're killing each other. That's not the main issue, but a huge issue is that there are not enough life-sustaining foods within Black and brown neighborhoods. And honestly, the answer to that is a lot of more urban gardens and farms, but that's not truly being recognized, I don't think, on the level that it should be by the city and city governments, because it's extremely hard for many people who are local community gardeners to actually gain ownership of the lands to farm. There are about 740 community gardens in Philadelphia, but only half of them are legally owned. And the process to acquire land to own a garden and farm is extremely hard. And many people who are elderly who tend to these gardens don't know the legal stunts they have to pull through to gain ownership of these lands. So the one thing that we should definitely look at to combat food insecurity and gun violence is to allow communities and to encourage urban gardens and farms, because not only do they grow fresh produce and vegetables, they also serve as community centers. They also serve as holistic spaces where people can come and just relax and calm down. There have been many times where I've been working at my farm where people have come in and just said, I just need to stay here. We didn't ask them why, we didn't ask them what's happening. We just knew that they just had to get off on the street and come to a safe space to cool down, and then they would just leave. So there is definitely a connection between food and gun violence and just the atmosphere of having a community garden and farm in your own backyard as well.
I'm wondering how many community gardens we have in the entire city of Philadelphia. If we can have somebody look that up, somebody from Bebashi, maybe Judan or someone else, just because I think that would be an interesting thing to point out. But now I want to go to Janice, because you have a different perspective in terms of how you see this. I mean, you work with the food pantry, so you hear from many different people, Janice. When you talk to these people, and just from all of the information that you've gathered, what suggestions do you have for improving local food systems?
I totally agree with Tyler. So I'm going to give a personal example. So I live in Germantown, okay? Love living in Germantown. Germantown has a rich history. However, what we are becoming known for is the violence in Germantown. My next door neighbor, 20-something-year-old young man, right? Apartment right next to mine. He was shot and he was killed over Mother's Day this weekend. We had a really bloody Mother's Day, and I think there were 8 people killed. He was one of those 8 who was killed over the weekend. And I think about all of, I just think about all of the loss, like all of these young men, all of these lives with all of these abilities and potential that we're losing. And I agree with Tyler. I want to see more urban farms. I want to see more community gardens. People in Germantown have really been innovative about how they are providing food to their neighbors. We have about 3 community fridges, and our team, our HES team, we donate to those fridges every month. We partner with urban creators. So our HES staff, we go to the farm and we distribute food. I want to see things like mobile supermarkets. I've been hearing a lot about that. I want to see mobile supermarkets. I want to see more entrepreneurship. I want to see more young people with food carts. There's a young man in my community who runs a food cart. He just opened his cart a few months ago, and I remember walking by him, and what attracted me was just how colorful his cart was. And he had these really positive messages about mentorship. And I had to go over to him and start a conversation. I said, wow, this is really great. You run this. And I mean, this is a young Black male. And so I started visiting his food cart like at least once a week. I also want to see more healthy food in our community. So again, this goes back to the importance of the farms and the community gardens. I want to see more people growing their own food and selling food to each other. That's more of what I want to see.
Councilwoman Gauthier, you of all of us here, you have the ability to talk to other leaders in Philadelphia, people within the police department. And so when we've talked a lot about food insecurity, I'm wondering if there are any other, when it comes to the issue of gun violence, if there are other root causes of gun violence that need to be addressed in the city.
Sure. Can I first add that I love all the energy around urban farms and gardens. And I'm working on a piece of legislation for the fall with Philadelphia Coalition for Affordable Communities that would give grassroots organizations that want to form community land trusts a leg up in the city's land disposition process as it relates to vacant land that's owned by the city of Philadelphia. So it would allow, these groups to really compete in a way that they can't now with folks who are trying to access this land and have more of an ability to set up beneficial things for our community members, whether that be deeply affordable and permanently affordable housing or urban farms and gardens. So I'm pretty excited about that. As it relates to, yes, gun violence and other root causes, absolutely we need to be trying to invest in people and neighborhoods in a way that I think can alleviate this violence greatly. I would like to see us, in addition to, having more violence interrupters in our neighborhoods, a lot of the violence that we're seeing in West and Southwest Philadelphia is street group violence. And so I think to the extent that we can get credible messengers out in our neighborhoods that can talk to young people and help to quell conflicts, we see a dramatic difference as a city. I think that we have to have real job opportunities for people, I think for the most at-risk people. I think we have to offer them an ability to support themselves and their families in a way that will turn people away from violence. I think we need more trauma services in our neighborhoods. Not only are victims and family members being traumatized by violence, but whole communities are being traumatized. People are having to deal with shootings on a regular basis where they live. And I think we have to offer more services as a city to help them heal and also to stop, to tamp down retaliatory violence as well. And so I've been pushing for a while with several other council members for us to have more investment in things that are preventative. In this most recent budget, several council members came together to demand $100 million be put into the FY22 budget for violence prevention and intervention in a way that would get at root causes. We didn't win the whole 100, but we won 70 million. That's a historic investment in prevention for the city of Philadelphia. And now the challenge is getting that money out on the street. So I absolutely agree.
We also have to understand that during this time also with the pandemic, a lot of resources are scarce. Right, we've seen a lot of that change over this last year, and Now, I asked a question just maybe a few minutes ago about about farming and what we have with gardens and things like that. And I did get the answer from our lovely friend Judan. She says there are more than 400 gardens across the city of Philadelphia, but we also know that the city lost at least 141 gardens and farms. And a lot of that is because you have a lot of developments going up and like taking up a lot of that space, which you would argue, I would say other stakeholders in the community would say, hey, that's necessary too. We do need to grow and put up all these buildings because we do have a housing insecurity and things like that. So this is one of those things where the topic or the subject might get a little bit more complicated when you talk about all these different things and these stakeholders that could be affected by this. Now, I just mentioned something a moment ago. That's why I'm so glad that I can see all of your faces. And I saw Councilwoman Gauthier's face and you just kind of looked a little skeptical. So just tell me what that's about.
Resources are available for the things we want to make resources available for. You know, we're seeing historic levels of violence, but we also had $1.6 billion in stimulus money come to Philadelphia. And at the same time that we were going through the FY22 budget process, there were 3 different tax cut proposals that would have cost the city millions and millions of dollars on the table for consideration. Right. And we, you know, a couple of those got pushed to the side, but we did wind up passing a wage tax cut that will cost the city $22 million. I'm glad that we got the $70 million for gun violence prevention, but that $20 million could also go towards investing in neighborhoods and people in a way that would tamp down violence. So it's how you spend your money is about your priorities. And in this city, I think we have to have a greater priority on the gun violence that's terrorizing Black and Brown communities.
I'm glad that you brought that up. And now I don't want Dr. Smith to think that that she's out of this conversation. So do you want to jump in and just add something, because you have a different perspective as a trauma surgeon when you deal with people on a very humane level when they are at their most vulnerable. What have you heard during your time that you think, I wish that this would get addressed?
Yeah, I mean, the same things that are going on in Philadelphia are going on in Atlanta and many other major cities in the US right now. Gun violence is just at an all-time high. And as a trauma surgeon, I always say I would be incredibly happy if I never, ever had to take care of another gun violence patient again. It's sickening. It's very traumatizing to the entire hospital staff that cares for the patient. And then, I'm always the one that has to go and talk to the family and tell the family when there's been a bad outcome. And I'm tired of it. I was shaking my head in agreement with the councilwoman, Jamie Gauthier, because I really do believe that we can address all these risk factors and root causes through both hospital-based violence intervention as well as community programs, and we have to work together. For some of these people, especially our young people, we're the first point of contact that they have with any medical system and any system in general besides the educational system. And we really can address some of the mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and food insecurity. And, the list goes on and on. And we talk a lot about hospital-based violence intervention programs as taking advantage of like the teachable moment, because people are a captive audience. They're in our hospitals, they're receiving care. And when they're hospitalized, they stay there until discharge. And then we can have like a warm handoff with the interrupters that I think are so incredibly important as like mitigating retaliation and then also just like preventing violence in the community. But I really do, I work very closely with one of my dear friends and colleagues, Jessica Beard at Temple. And we talk about all of these strategies for addressing all of the root causes that have been mentioned today. And not only addressing the risk factors, but also just really potentiating and leveraging protective factors that a lot of our patients have. A lot of young people have a lot of talents. They can go out, they can farm, they are artistic. There's so many ways that we can just really challenge the narrative and change the course of our young people. And so that's where I'm coming from, is that, like I said, I'm a trauma surgeon, but I would be very happy if I never had to deal with another gunshot victim again.
So we talked about, so you all mentioned, the need for more programs, more farms and things like that. So Tyler, if you could jump in here, because do you think the issue is that a lot of people don't know about a lot of the programs that are out there?
I would say so, especially in the neighborhood that I work in. Like I said, it is the poorest in Philadelphia, so it's very hard for people to have internet connection. And that has now become such a necessity where if you don't have internet, you don't really have anything. And also, since a lot of libraries shut down during COVID and a lot of the community centers shut down during COVID, all the information that was being given out was to who? Because we really couldn't see any of it. So there are many resources, and that's why a lot of these resources are being taken back to the hands of the community, is because of organizations such as Urban Creators and Bebashi, we can then give the information out to the people. So last year, speaking to Janice's point, last year, the Urban Creators, and this year we actually have a mobile market where we actually go around to different sections of Philadelphia and we distribute prepared meals, fresh produce, but our job was to also distribute the resources of what we got. So every time a council person or a state rep or a state senator sent me an email about any opportunities that are coming up, we printed hundreds of copies of those and make sure we put that on our market as well and distribute out to people. So that's also another main thing about community gardens and farms. We also serve as we also serve as a very big information distribution site as well, just for any type of resource. And one thing that I think that we should definitely talk about is just mental health as well. Maybe Dr. Smith can speak more about this, but my personal theory is that I really believe a lot of Black and brown people have a lot of mental health issues just due to the years of oppression and systematic racism that I truly believe that's now just ingrained in us, especially if you live in the inner city. So now living in Philadelphia. So not only do we have a lot of mental health issues just due to the years of oppression, we are so now living in the poorest, largest city in the United States. And we're also living in food insecurity. And we're also dealing with violence every day. So that already mental health that we suffer from just years of oppression, now toppled on with poverty and food insecurity, definitely makes things a lot worse. So yeah, when we talk about solving these issues, it's also just how do we combat mental health and how do we destroy that stigma? I know I personally know about it, but I know there's like a stigma in the Black community that we cannot go and get help, whether it's that the resources just is not there, or that's just something we don't talk about and we have to hold it in us as well. So we also just need to also talk about self-accountability as well. How do we as a people also just acknowledge that it's okay to seek help? It's okay to talk to people. It's okay to get therapy. And like I said before, urban gardens and farms and other community centers also serve as those spaces, but we need much more professional medical help as well.
Yes, yes, yes. You are totally preaching. Like, I honestly believe that mental health, number one, it's a risk factor for violence, but it also is a consequence of violence, right? People suffer from acute stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, you name it. But I really do think that there is just some deep-seated, like negativity when it comes to mental illness. People don't want to be seen as crazy. There's a huge stigma associated with getting assistance and help. People don't even know that as a victim of crime, you have victim of crime assistance, VOCA funds that can support you getting help. They don't know about the resources. They don't have access to it. And I really do think that you cannot have a violence intervention program without mental health. It just doesn't exist. It won't be successful. And so every time I talk about injury or violence prevention, whether it's in the hospital setting or community setting, we always have to have a big focus on mental illness and break down those stereotypes. Let people know that it's okay. When I talk to people when they're in the hospital, I literally ask them about pain, peeing, pooping, all the things, that you ask a person that's in the hospital. And then I say, what about your mood? Are you having nightmares? Are you reliving the incident? Because if we don't normalize it, people will go out and think they're crazy and never talk to anybody again. It's normal to have those sentiments. And then if they continue on and they're detrimental, you have to seek help. And I just let people know that is okay. It's okay to talk about it. And I think that's how you start to break down those walls, is just to have these conversations and let people know that they should not feel ashamed. They should seek help. And then if they are seeking help, make sure that they have the help when they seek it, right? Make sure that when they call a phone number, they're not just put on hold, or it's not just ringing, that somebody answers the phone and that they have the resources that they need.
I just keep thinking when I'm listening to all of you guys saying this is that do you think that there should also be more people who have access these services, who are members of the community, for them to come forward and say, hey, I suffer from this too? Because that makes a huge difference. If you see somebody in your community that maybe you might not expect, I mean, it seems unfair to put that responsibility on that person, but it does make a difference when you hear that from somebody else in that community saying, I've had trouble with this too. I'm on medication. I'm on antidepressants. I suffer from anxiety, yada, yada, yada. It does change things when you hear that.
May I interject for a minute? I'm sorry. We lost Tyreek due to some technological issues, but I wanted to read something very briefly that he wrote. So there was an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer back in March, and the title of the article was 10 Ideas to Stem the Tide of Philly's Gun Violence Crisis. So Tyreek wrote, something we already mentioned, fund more community organizations. And he wrote, this is a public health situation that needs to be addressed on all levels. The normal in our society has been poverty, gun violence, disparities in food. So then he talks about what his organization does. Young Chances provides services with less of the red tape. If you need free food, you don't need to worry about bringing all that information. What's your income? What's your zip code? How many people live in your house? People don't want to say, I don't have an income. There's 40 people living in my house. I don't know what my bills are because they're all shut off. For Young Chances, if you want food, school supplies, hygiene materials, just come ask. I love that. I love that his organization is that open that people can just walk through the door and express their need and have that need met. Like, I love that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted him to be on this panel, because I absolutely love that. And then he wrote something else that I thought was really important too. He wrote, groups and programs that have multi-million-dollar budgets and initiatives really don't have the impact that small organizations throughout the city have on a day-to-day basis, not through marketing campaigns or the advertising. I'm talking about the house-to-house, porch-to-porch approach that those organizations deal with, not big community events once, twice a year when it looks good. We're talking about when they can pick up the phone and call you at 11:30 at night. You can respond at 1 a.m. and they understand. Those are the types of programs that are out here and not really supported.
Would I be able to add something quickly?
Go ahead.
I thank you for reading that because I think it's really important. And I wanted to just note that the budget that was passed for FY22 included $20 million for grassroots organizations just like Young Chances, who have the relationships and the credibility and are doing good work in the community, who have not been supported, who have been just using every resource they could find, but not being supported by the city and others. And I'm grateful for that. Because I think it will make a difference. It's a 10-fold increase over what the city was previously putting out in the targeted investment grants, which were about $2 million a year. But we got to get that money on the street. If we don't move with haste, if we don't move at a pace that is as urgent as we're seeing people get killed and maimed in Philadelphia, then shame on us.
There is we do have to talk about synergy and how communities and legislators can work together to advance, because I think that all of our panelists are in agreement here as to what needs to be done, right? But now we sort of need to connect the dots and keep this moving forward. So how can all of you or people that are in your positions work together to curb the violence and food insecurity and all of these things? And to anybody who wants to jump in, the question is open. The floor is open.
Yeah, one thing I would definitely say is encourage entrepreneurship. I know so many people, young people, who want to start a business. They want to get their own brand out there and start something that will make money, not only for them, but also for their neighborhood. But they just cannot because they don't know the legal requirements, or they don't know who to go to in City Hall and Municipal Services Building. It seems like there's a gap between this information. So if there's a way that city government can make it much easier and more accessible for people in poor communities to get their businesses started, that would be a great first step. Just encouraging entrepreneurship, local economy, and local businesses.
Janice, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, Bebashi services are open to everyone. So when someone walks through our door, we don't know if they've been, a victim of a firearms injury. If they disclose that, that's fine. But we want folks to know that our doors are open for anyone. And especially our Food First Pantry, we've really been striving to make sure that we have healthy options for folks. We've even begun to, order some vegan and vegetarian options. And it's so funny because yesterday we had a visitor to the pantry and it turns out he was vegan. So we had some options for him, but we also asked him for some recommendations on things that we can be ordering. I mean, we want folks to be able to walk through our door and be fed and be able to find the food that they need to keep themselves healthy. We've been getting all of this produce. It's so funny. We got these Japanese eggplants and people don't know what they are. And we were talking about, well, maybe we need to take some time to like really sit down and explain to folks what the vegetable is, like how you can cook it and that sort of thing. And those are the things that we want to do. But if folks have been, affected by firearms violence, it's like Randi said, they have to have nutritious food, and we're very committed to providing nutritious food for the visitors who come to our food pantry.
And I just want to add something, Janice, because I've done a few stories on y'all's food pantry, that you guys also have recipe cards. So when you give out a lot of these foods to people, you teach them how to cook it. So it's not a mystery.
Right, and again, we want to continue doing more of that, talking to more nutritionists. There's one person I really want to give a shout out to. I don't know if she's on the call, but Molly Reardon, she's the Good Food Purchasing Coordinator for the City of Philadelphia. She's with the Philadelphia Department of Health in their Division of Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention. She has provided Bebashi, the head staff, with so many resources, so many things that we can do, again, to make sure that we're providing nutritious meals for our visitors. Like, for example, she connected us to a culinary student who taught us how to make spice mixes. So now when we go to the schools, we're able to distribute the spice mixes so that people, so that there's more flavor in the food and folks don't have to worry about, using a lot of salt. These spice mixes are excellent. She connected us with someone else who has a farm, and they've been providing us with produce as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge her because, again, talking to people and connecting with people is something that we really strive to do because, even we're providing, we're addressing food insecurity, but again, the gun violence crisis in the city, it affects us all. Like every day I come to my office and I'm reading the paper, and every day there's a story about another shooting. And it traumatizes me because I think about the person who has lost their life or the person who's been injured and the family. That could be any one of us. I always tell people bullets don't have eyes. In my community in Germantown, like I get alerts on my phone where shootings have happened, like within walking distance of me. So this is an issue that is personal to me as well.
By the way, we're going to go to our Q&A session in approximately 9 minutes. So I just kind of want to keep this conversation going. The next question I want to ask is about your specific organizations, because we do want to highlight that. I don't just want to, earlier I read everyone's bios, but I want to hear from everybody who represents an organization in their own words as to what their organization does to help people or families that have been hurt by gun violence. And I'll start with you, Tyler.
Sure. So I work for an organization called the Philadelphia Urban Creators, and I am the community organizer for that job, for the business. And how we serve people who are victims of gun violence is that we just become that place where people can just come and meditate, or where they can just come and just, get away from it all. As soon as it's located right at 11th and Dolphin Streets, but as soon as you walk through those gates, you completely forget you're in the middle of the city because you just see green, you see the vegetables growing, you see flowers blooming. So it just really serves as that meditation place. We have a fire pit. People can sit around the fire and just forget about all their issues. If people want to learn how to farm and garden, get into the soil, reconnect with the land, it's very spiritual that people get to farm and garden. There's something about your skin touching soil that just relieves all the stress away from you. So we always keep an open. Yeah, so we always keep an open gate policy. Anybody can come in at any time. If they just need to chill, relax. We are always there. If they do need some type of service, if they need to know about rental assistance or how to get in contact with a mental health professional, we make sure that we find a number or website for them, or we connect them with our local partners as well, such as Bebashi. We can send them their way. And we just serve as an open place where people can come and relax. And we also point people in the right direction to where they need to go if they're completely lost.
Dr. Smith, I know that you joined the Violence Prevention Task Force in 2017, and you've basically acquired a reputation for yourself for your involvement in hospital-based violence prevention strategies. This is something that we haven't really discussed in the last hour that we've been speaking. So can you talk about how that works as far as gun violence?
Yes, absolutely. So I've lived in many cities across the country, and most of the busy level 1 trauma centers have hospital-based violence intervention programs where, like I mentioned earlier, we see people in the hospital and we take advantage of what we are calling the teachable moment. They're in the hospital. They entrust us to care for them for their physical wounds. And we really want to get down to the root causes that led to their injury. And so we work with case managers to figure out their risk factors. We work with community-based organizations to get them the resources that they need. And we do focus on a lot of mitigation of risk factors. We help them with substance abuse issues, unemployment, housing, education, life skills, and just like, if they need a GED, we help them get their GED. They need a job, we help them to write a resume, and all these different things. There are many programs that are sprouting up around the country, and I'm fairly new to the Atlanta area, so we're trying to sprout one up in Atlanta. But right now we focus on providing a lot of mental health resources to our patients. And the other thing that we do that's a little bit different is that we really do try to leverage protective factors. So we just recently started an art therapy program for our patients to help them recover from trauma as an outlet from, all of the aggression that they may be having, or just the built up emotion dealing with the trauma in general. Food insecurity is definitely a part of our algorithm as well. And we have programs, like there's a program called Food as Medicine in our hospital, but historically it's been focused on patients with diabetes and not really focused on people with gun violent injuries. And so I've just been trying to advocate for our patients, and the paper that I wrote was really the telltale sign. It's like, look, gun violent patients, they don't have a high glucose level, but they definitely have a high need. And so we're really trying to just address these issues and work very closely with the community to partner with the community to get the resources to our patients.
Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. And I just want to take a moment right here because we have 5 minutes left of our discussion before we go to Q&A. But Tyreek, our friend Tyreek Glasgow, is on right now. And he came in just in time because, Tyreek, if you could hear me, we're talking about everyone's specific organizations and the work that they do to help individuals or families who have been affected by gun violence. So I want to give you the floor here. Tell us a little bit more about Young Chances. I'll just give it a second here. Tyreek, are you on? Could you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Tyreek.
Yes, I want to say thank you again for inviting me, and I apologize again, ladies, having bad signal inside the courthouse today. But just a little background on Young Chances. We are a community-based organization out of South Philadelphia, created to just provide programs and resources without any of the red tape that the community receives through government or any agency to provide, food, recreation, or mental health resources. Over the past 16 months since the pandemic, we have partnered with a multitude of organizations, city agencies, and elected officials to combat poverty in a way that it address not only the community level, but inside of the council floors and our state senate office. During those partnerships, we have 3 initiatives that we created. That was the Safe Place for Kids initiative, our Rally Against Poverty initiatives, and the South Philadelphia Resource Network. And all of them are community driven, but our focus on each one is our kids, our community, and just bringing resources to the table. Our motto in South Philadelphia is we're trying to bring our own table so we can get off the menu. And a lot of times as a community, we know that systems don't feed us the way that other communities are being fed. So we just try to work together to reduce all of those things and provide a better quality of life for our community every day.
So can you, if there's anybody who has not heard of Young Chances Foundation and they need help, could you tell us just an easy way that people can access can access your organization to get help? Tyreek?
Yes, so we are on social media. Our organization is on Facebook, but a lot of the things that we do, we partner in the community with community partners like the 17th Police District, Bafana, Anya's in touch with Miss Little is on the phone who's doing some communication for us with feeding the homeless. Our contact information is 267-585-2923. That's our phone number, and our Community Engagement Center is located in South Philadelphia on 27th and Tasker, 2703 Tasker Street, and we're open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night with free resources throughout the day, from PPE gear, food, Pampers, masks, hygiene products, pots, pans, housing supplies, whatever you need inside of your house or whatever you need just to live day to day to make sure that you, your family, or even your neighbor is cool. Because sometimes you may be all right, but you know that your friends and your next door neighbors may need a helping hand. And we're just there just to bridge that gap for our community. It's to go into a little small detail for our Safe Place for Kids. It was an initiative that we started with not just community members, but also elected officials to address the poverty in our area. In Great Ferry, there is violent crime rate at 1,200% towards 1,000 residents, compared to 900 to 100,000 in the city of Philadelphia. And what we wanted to do is just address not only the effects of the crime, but what causes those effects. And sometimes people didn't want to talk about the food disparity. They didn't want to talk about the things that triggers these things, these effects from violence. And what I mean by that is, I was reading Dr. Smith's findings, and it just took me to what Jay-Z said: men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And I could take away from what she talked about in Atlanta, and she talked about whatever the food disparities. And we know that breakfast is the number one thing that gets your day started. In Great Ferry, there's no quality food pantry. There's no quality recreation that provides just the nourishment to produce a healthy body. And I looked at a lot of the other findings in the area, and it really cemented what we wanted as a community, but we were on the menu. And that's why we build our own table now. Now, when you talk about food, a lot of people talk about your intake and what's healthy and what's not. First, it has to be the conversation. If the conversation isn't healthy, if it doesn't benefit the people that you're targeting, they're really not going to eat it. They're not going to take the information healthy. They're going to take it where you're putting a finger at them that are looking in the mirror and saying that this is institutionalized racism. These are some of the things that affect these people every day. Maybe if you use some of the rec centers that you don't fund on a day-to-day basis or a year-to-year physical basis, and put a food pantry in there. Maybe if you use the libraries that you know that don't have no books on there, and you put some educational things about how to cook and how to feed your community in a proper way. Maybe if you took some of those lots that the people in the city are selling for $100,000 and you have an urban garden there to produce fresh fruit and vegetables in your community, because you know this is what's needed. diabetes is one of the highest rates in the Black and brown community, but yet you don't see any in your fruits and vegetables pantries that's needed to offset those things. But yet you see Chinese stores, you see Dominican stores, you see fast food growing up faster than you see anything else. So just to partner with these organizations is our COVID, is our little vaccine for poverty, so to say. COVID has taken, the forefront, as it should, as a public health and public safety issue. But for us, poverty is an everyday pandemic. Every day you wake up not knowing when your next meal is going to come from. And I have the privilege to work with some organizations that the vaccine is going out there and working every day and finding initiatives to produce a positive community.
All right, Tyreek, thank you. And now I think it's time to go to our Q&A session. And Judan, if you could join us again. I don't know who is going to take that over, but if we can start our Q&A session, because you have a lot of people writing into us. So take it away.
Yes, that would be me. So we have one question from Will Carter. He would like to know, why doesn't the city do more conflict control, such as talking to the people in neighborhoods so that more people could be seen in that way?
I mean, I think if I could jump in, that we should absolutely be doing more around conflict resolution and violence interruption, and that would help us to stop conflicts from turning into shootings. We do have community crisis intervention here in Philadelphia. And so we have violence interrupters that go out into communities across the city. But at this moment, we need to be significantly ramping up that activity. And I also think we should be making those resources available at neighborhood resource centers like rec centers, libraries, and places, particularly where young people are. So I fully agree with that point.
Anyone else?
I would like to piggyback on what that's Councilman Gauthier, but also just having, elected officials understand and being in the forefront of what's going on. When you talk about gun violence and you talk about poverty, a lot of people don't understand what it is day to day to see the people coming up. So I would think that council service areas would be something that should be implemented, that the people that are representing those areas identify what needs to be done. The Philadelphia Police Department has what they call PSAs, and PSA stands for Police Service Areas, and those police service areas identify crime. And what they do inside those areas is try to find initiatives to reduce them. Why not have food service areas, and you identify what area in this community has a high rate of poverty or food deficit, and you concentrate your resources and information to strengthen them. And a lot of times they are led by long-term residents who are not, privileged to social media, who doesn't understand the telecommunication concept. But if you have a grassroots and a core competency program, that will help. And what I mean by long-term residents, those are the block captains. Those are the grandmoms who are still out there doing their stuff without the funding, without those, big names, and not on social media, not jumping in front of the camera from what you see nowadays. This new generation, they're about the likes. They're about it, but it's not what I would say effective. And what I mean by effective is making sure that the 14 to 15-year-old young girl that's probably pregnant, that's out there doing something that she's not doing, supposed to be doing, to help that group, to help those community members who need that extra pushing. And sometimes it really starts with a meal.
Would any of the panelists like to answer? I saw earlier Mr. Carter had his hand up. I'm not sure if he still had a question. Mr. Carter?
Hello, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Did you have another question for the panel?
Yeah, my question is, I sit on Bebashi's Community Advisory Board. When you have people that volunteer to come in to help the community, why aren't organizations such as Bebashi relying more on that advisory board. Advisory boards, as far as I know, because I've been there for a while, is more than an hour and a half a month because we all utilize services there. I've been utilizing the services there for almost 22 years now, and they have greatly improved. But is there room for improvement? Yes, and they have done that, like such as their pantry. I recently visited there. It was such a positive experience because they were teaching people how to shop, how to plan meals, and doing that. But if you're going to have people there on your panels and do that, if you're going to volunteer to help someone, so I think it's up to the organizations when people walk in that door to teach them how to help themselves. And that's what all of you all been saying, but no one's doing it. I have been doing grassroots stuff for a long time, and I put my money where my mouth is only because when I did join that board, I have people there who were also doing that, but they have since left. But I think it starts with utilizing that case manager, teaching them how to ask questions. And as the doctor said, you have to take those tough questions and make those tough questions normal questions for them. You have to normalize them. So I want to know how each of you can maybe partnership with Bebashi as to, come into some of their support groups and speak to them. I'm in North Philly. I didn't even know that you guys had farm places around here. Now, do they have places in my area? It's very heavily drug populated, but there's also a lot of places in recovery. They give out food almost every day around here, but they're doing nice things. It's like putting benches out there. People are actually congregating and talking and staying a little while after receiving their goods. So they're getting dignity back. And that's what we need to get back to, the basis of teaching people how to help themselves and not totally rely on the city. City doesn't have a lot of money, but how to totally rely on the agencies and to also use the smaller agencies, because I know when I walk in that door and what other people walk into Bebashi, everyone knows who you are for the most part. But if you walk into some of the other larger social service agencies here in the city, you're just a number. That's all you are. But no one gives you that quality care or that little extra push. And that's what I'm asking each of you to figure out, how to use your community advisory boards and continue to flourish. Because I want to see it. I love living down here in North Philly. Never thought I would, but I just love it because the people are caring if they're shown a different path. But many of them, as you know, the cycle just continues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I don't know if any of the panelists would like to respond to what he said.
I do want to make a brief comment with regard to volunteering at Bebashi. We had a healthy group of volunteers before the pandemic. So then when the pandemic hit and places were closing down, we had to restructure things a bit here. We just recently reopened. So now we're at the point now where we're asking volunteers to come, to come and work with us. As a matter of fact, my team and I were on a call last week with a local organization that wants to come in and do some volunteer work with us. And we've also recently had other groups volunteering for special events that we had. So yes, we want to have volunteers come through our doors again. That is not an issue. We could always use help with the food pantry. We can always use help, bringing boxes in and stocking things and greeting visitors and that sort of thing. So volunteers, Bebashi clients who want to volunteer, they're more than welcome to do so. Now that we're able to open our space again, we're more than welcoming, volunteers.
This is Terry. For Young Chances Foundation, we are open to partner with any part of the city. We have our resource network, and we're talking with our council person, who is Councilman Johnson, and our state rep also to come up with a free card. And it stands PHREE. It's Philadelphia Resources for Education and Employment. Because a lot of times people want you to give, but they are not receiving the things that you want. And the city may identify themselves by not having money, but one thing that the city do have is resources, and those are not connected. And they always ask for the community input, but the output is them. If they can put some of those departments that have a community engagement fund to assist with the organization capacity of these groups that are doing stuff volunteer work based, to give volunteers incentives, like not just the food, but counseling. Help them understand that, yes, you're volunteering because maybe your mental capacity or your work effort is not there to get you a job, but we want to help you get to that level. And we don't want to keep taking out of you all the time. We want to pour some in. I mentored Terry Carpenter, before he passed away last August 7th. His motto was, you keep what you have by giving it away. And that's what the city should do. If they want resources, if they want the community to be healthy, give them resources, give them healthiness, give them positive things that will help organizations grow. And maybe it's not the funding. Maybe it's an intern that can help put some grants together to get them some food. Maybe it's just some gear, some PPE gear, some sanitizer, just transportation. Maybe Parks and Rec can give up some of those vans that they have just sitting at the carousel house to go out and have resource stops. And that helps, because sometimes we always think that people want to do, but they don't know how to receive. And that's what we do at Young Chances. We try to give our people not only the time, but the looking in the mirror aspect of what do you need to continue doing your work and to make our community and our organization grow.
Okay, and we have two questions from Troy Wilson, Esquire. His first question is, what role can restorative justice play in community-based violence prevention or reduction? And his second question is, are you linking with Black farmers organizations in reference to obtaining food for our food pantries? So I can repeat the questions again. What role can restorative justice play in community?
Hey, baby.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what role can restorative justice play in community-based violence prevention or reduction? And the second question is, are you linking up with Black farmers organizations in reference to obtaining food for the food pantries?
Yes, I would like to jump in. I would say that restorative justice plays a key factor in this. Once you serve your time, your record should be expunged. And you should be able to go back into the workforce and live your life normally, what you want to do, instead of having a record hold you back. Now, when we're talking about poverty, we're talking about food insecurity. So of course, it's more than likely that someone from the inner city would have a record because they had to do what they had to do to survive. But now, sadly, after serving their time, that record holds them back from ever obtaining a job. So restorative justice is very important. The records should be expunged once they serve their time. But restorative justice is great, but it can't truly live its purpose if there aren't jobs available still. If you're still in the same neighborhood that still does not have jobs, that still does not have resources, you're going to still wind up going back to the same thing that got you in prison in the first place. I personally know a lot of people who went through the restorative justice program. They were set straight for about a year, but eventually they went back to their life of crime because there still was not that consistent employment to keep them on this straight track. So restorative justice is something that is great in theory and it needs to happen, but still, if we still live in these deeply impoverished neighborhoods that do not have proper job training or jobs available, then it kind of is still repeating that cycle.
I think restorative justice is important in this conversation as well, to the extent that we're able to have people understand the impact of things that they may have done or crimes that were committed without pushing them through the criminal justice system. I think we allow people to have a better opportunity to even get away from violence. We recently implemented a small restorative justice pilot here in Philadelphia through the district attorney's office. And so 25 youth from 12 to 17 will be able to connect with community members and come up with a plan that makes some sort of restitution for a wrong without flowing through the traditional criminal justice system. So I think restorative justice gives people an opportunity, right? And it has shown good outcomes, because sometimes when we're pushing more and more people into the criminal justice system, we're harming their ability to have a good job, to be productive, which might further increase their participation in violence. So I look forward to seeing the results of what we're doing here in Philadelphia, and to having that program expand over time. And then to the second point around working with Black farmers, we should absolutely be doing more of that. I loved all the energy on this call about urban gardens and urban farms, and using that as a way to not only empower communities, but impact this food insecurity issue. And so I know there are many Black farmers across the city, but I'd love to see us support that activity even more.
If I can make a comment about restorative justice, we have this saying when we talk about our hospital-based violence intervention programs that hurt people. And I think if you think about restorative justice in that way, it just adds a layer of empathy and compassion for both victims and perpetrators of violence. And so although I don't have any experience with the programs related to restorative justice, I do think that that's a concept that we should definitely keep in our minds, is that hurt people. And if we approach it that way, then we don't treat people as criminals, we treat them as victims, and we can actually help them to heal from all of their trauma. It's an idea of trauma-informed care that we need to incorporate in our practice of providing services, whether it's healthcare services or other services for these people who have been victims of violence.
Okay, and that's it for all the questions. We do have one statement from Mr. Carter, who just wanted to compliment Janice. He believes that she has made great change, encouraging persons to get more involved. So he wanted to make that statement to you, Janice. So thank you, Mr. Carter, and everyone who asked the question.
Judith, could I interject for one quick minute regarding the last question about working with Black farmers? My team and I have really been busy, and we had meetings scheduled with one particular group, a group of Black farmers. So we're trying very hard to reschedule that meeting. But the gentleman who posed that question, if he has any resources, he's more than welcome to email me, because that's something that we're definitely interested in. Like I said, I live in Germantown, and we have, mostly Black population. So that's more of what I want to see. I want to see more Black, more Black farming and Black people doing urban gardening and with the food trucks and all of that. So if he has resources, he can definitely email me, janice.t@bebashi.org. And I, love to be able to follow up with that.
Okay, great. And we actually received one more question. So if we could quickly answer this one. How can these services help the homeless community? Are these programs available to come to shelters and provide information sessions?
Yeah, so at Bebashi, we do a lot of outreach. So yeah, we go anywhere. And as a matter of fact, we have homeless, we have homeless clients and visitors come to Bebashi all the time. As a matter of fact, we had a visitor to the pantry that we all know, and he's a homeless gentleman, but he comes to Bebashi all the time, and he gets snacks and food from the pantry. So yes, homeless individuals do come to Bebashi for services. And, if people ask us to go out and make a presentation about our services, we're more than happy to do that.
Yes, and at Young Chances, we also go to different events and partner, but we also use a different mechanism. We use the youth in our community to be a voice. A lot of, I'm going to keep saying but I'm just looking at the clip back, but a lot of way that you market, you use a face. And what we try to do is put our kids in the front before they're put on the t-shirt. And what we try to do is let them know that these are the things that they need right now. Before they get to 14, before they get to 15, help them eat, help them go to school, help them with their rec centers. And this is what they're saying. We use spoken word, we use recreation, we use the images that are positive to remove the things that they see every day. Every weekend in our community, we do community cleanups. And not just the sweeping, but we go and we look for gun shell residue. We remove the teddy bears from off of the corner. And not as a disrespect, but our kids should not see that every day because that becomes normalized to them, that their friend or that the way that their life should end up is this way on a t-shirt. Yeah, teddy bears on a pole or not going to a rec center. So what we try to do is really put them into the forefront of driving their own car for success. So if y'all would like us to come and do some presentation or to just do some community information sessions to give some awareness of what your community is doing, we'd be more than welcome to help with that.
All right, so thank you so much to all of our panelists and our moderator. I think this was a very open and honest discussion. And hopefully it will help to bring about some sort of change in our communities to address this issue that many are calling a plague. And we just want to see, as we said earlier, we want to see our communities flourish and bring an end to the violence that's sweeping through not just Philadelphia, but I think it's nationwide. We've been seeing a lot of gun violence issues. So hopefully this will be the first step to seeing some significant change. At this point, I would like to introduce Liam McShay, one of Bebashi's HES Community Outreach Specialists, to briefly speak about Bebashi's hunger relief services.
Hi everyone, my name is Liam McShay, HES Community Outreach Specialist at Bebashi, and I'm here to tell you all about the hunger relief services that Bebashi has to offer. Bebashi's Hunger Relief Department is comprised of two programs, our Food First Pantry and our Health Enterprise Zone project, also known as HES. Our Food First Pantry recently unveiled its grocery-style pantry that is a client choice model utilizing a point system. The pantry's main goal is to provide nutritious food and reduce food waste by giving our visitors and clientele the opportunity to make their own food choices. Some of the staples offers include a variety of meats, rice, pastas, and other non-perishable items, as well as eggs, dairy, different varieties of milks, snacks, vegetarian and vegan options, and fresh produce that is supplied to us by local urban farmers. We also receive generous donations from community partners. The pantry is open Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., and visitors can come twice per month or once a month to utilize twice the number of points. Our HES Enterprise Zone project, or Health Enterprise Zone project, addresses food insecurity in 14 different zip codes in North and Northwest Philadelphia. HES does this by conducting community outreach to inform the public about Bebashi's health and food services. Through our HES Eats program, we provide food to hundreds of students and their families in 4 Philadelphia public schools, as well as to our community partner, PCOM, for their pantry. Apart from the HES Eats program, we partner with other organizations to distribute food, as well as donate regularly to community fridges within our HES zip codes. In the past year, HES has developed and printed a HES resource guide, which provides information on free food, health centers, libraries, and LGBTQ+ services that are located within the HES zip codes. The resource guide will soon be released in Spanish, and the latest HES project is to donate 2 refrigerators to be utilized as community fridges in the Kensington and Fair Hill Hartramp communities. You can find out more information on our website at www.bebashi.org. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much, Liam. And that brings us to the end of our event. We thank you so much for joining us. We encourage you to connect with us to learn about the many ways that you can get involved in our work and make an impact in your communities. We also ask that you follow us on social media to keep up to date with our latest news and upcoming events. So thank you again, and please enjoy the remainder of your day.